overall, Dara, what we're seeing is that the market has started to stabilise, which means that the national rate of asking price inflation has started to ease back somewhat. And certainly you can see that in Clare. You can see that prices remain stable over the past year, and there was no change at all on prices in the last 3 months of the year, with the median asking price now at €285,000. So this has been probably a trend line that has been emerging certainly over the last 6 months of 2025. National asking price inflation now stands at just over 5%. And also what you can see in the data is that bidding pressure, which was there during the summer, where people were bidding properties up to, 8.6% above the asking price, that has now also started to moderate and come back to just over 7%. But just, not to burst anybody's bubble here, certainly what we're seeing is that while the rate of asking price inflation has started to come back, competition still remains very strong for property because we still have very limited supply, and we have ongoing demand, which is going to outpace that supply as we look to the year ahead.
Yeah, could it be a bit of a red herring? Because although prices from an asking price point of view may seem like they're stabilising or slowing down, with the average time for sale agreed in this county still at 4 months, I'd imagine that you're going to pay a lot more than the asking price, or a considerable bit more, by the time that whole bidding process is over with.
Well, certainly what you can see is the average now of the premium being paid on the final sold price over the asking stands at about 7%. It would have been much higher than that, during the summer last year, closer to 8-9%, as I mentioned. But just to come back to your point about could this be a red herring? It's difficult to say because the property market in Clare, like in every other county, is very dependent on actually what's going to happen with supply. So, and if I look at the data for Clare, as we got to the end of the year, there was just 269 properties available for sale in the county. Now that had decreased by 5% during the last 3 months of the year. And when you see a reduction in supply, which you would typically see during the winter months, but when you see a reduction in supply, that tends to mean that prices could start to edge upwards again. So certainly, what we're seeing nationally and what we're forecasting is, more moderate asking price inflation for the market as we look to 2026. So probably more like 2-3% asking price increases, but it is all very much dependent on supply in the county. So if you got a lot more new homes development, for example, in Clare, coming through in 2026, you're likely to see prices, beginning to really stabilise and not really, move up too much. But if you don't get a lot of new homes development happening in the county, you're likely to see asking prices starting to tip up again at a stronger pace.